We are in the midst of a cultural reckoning about sexual assault. Not only are more and more women coming forward with their stories and actually being believed, but the prominent men they are accusing are facing real consequences. You know, as opposed to the usual none. And while all this began in Hollywood with the allegations against film producer Harvey Weinstein, sexual violence is a problem in every industry and everywhere. A recent study found 53% of women in Canada have experienced unwanted sexual pressure. That's 8 million women, and I hate to say it, but that number even seems low. Since 1999, rates of sexual assault have remained relatively unchanged, while other crimes like robbery and assault are declining. This data is based on a general StatsCan survey of civilians, so it includes instances of sexual assault that were reported to police and instances that were not. Sexual assault has long been thought of as something that happens to people wandering in dark alleyways late at night in a short skirt, a crime only committed by deranged strangers who prey upon vulnerable women. When really, the term sexual assault refers to any sexual contact or behavior that occurs without explicit consent. Consent essentially is permission. Canada's criminal code defines it as the voluntary agreement to engage in sexual activity. It can be verbal or expressed through actions. It's all about communication. You can consent to one thing but not others, and you can change your mind at any point. While cases like Weinstein, Bill Cosby, and Jian Ghomeshi are complex in their own ways, a common issue was the lack of consent. And this is not something that's unique to these high-profile cases. A 2015 study found that only 1 in 3 Canadians actually understand what consent means. That's likely because education around consent in classrooms varies across Canada. In some provinces, the word consent is not mentioned in the curriculum at all.
This is all wrong.
So I went across Canada this year and did a lot of consent conversations for orientation, and the conversations ranged. But one of the key things that came up in every time I spoke was I would ask these 3 questions. I would say, okay, what did you learn in high school about sex? And some students put up their hand that they did have sexual health education, and some students said they didn't have any. And the ones that did have sexual health education, they learned about the mechanics of sex. So, and let's talk about heterosexual sex, right? So this idea of how to have heterosexual sex and to use condoms and to protect yourself from pregnancy. But there was no conversations about pleasure. No student raised their hand when I asked them, did they learn about pleasure? So how do we expect students to have consensual sex when we don't even talk about what kinds of sex you can have or how to have sex that is about listening to your partner, making sure that they feel good, making sure you feel good, and knowing you want to be there.
When looking to fill these knowledge gaps, we naturally pick up cues about how to approach relationships and sex from movies like this.
Stop that.
Stop what?
Stop that. My hands are dirty.
My hands are dirty, too. What are you afraid of?
Afraid?
You're trembling.
I'm not trembling.
You like me because I'm a scoundrel. There aren't enough scoundrels in your life.
I happen to like nice men.
Nice man.
Very nice.
Or this.
Skip it. I'm not interested. Let's go.
What would it take for you to see things my way?
A lot more than you've got.
Yeah. Now let's both play.
Both women are in a position where they are overpowered by men, and neither have expressed consent verbally or physically. But in both movies, the scenes are framed as the beginning of epic romances.
I think where it becomes a bit challenging for folks is this concept of coercion that's embedded sometimes in experiences around non-consensual behavior, where folks feel like they are consenting, but really there's added layers of coercion, of fear that influence that decision. And that is really where the contention lies. Folks know that no means no. I think that what they struggle with is those nuanced pieces that aren't always so clear-cut.
So if you're ever unsure about how your partner's feeling, just ask.
Can I give you a kiss?
Yes.
Are you sure?
Still, scenes like these are rare. Most images reinforce traditional gender roles and place men in the position of power and deny women autonomy over their bodies. And while men are victims of sexual assault too, this is the reason that women, and really anyone who aligns more with a feminine identity, are affected that much more.
We learn this idea that sex is a conquest, not a collaboration. So we learn this idea that masculine identified folks can just take us, right, as femme folks. They just can take us over and make decisions about how sex is enacted. When I talk to young men, this idea that they're magically supposed to know everything about sex and relationships, and when they start having relationships, that they're the knowledge holders and we're the knowledge, we get the knowledge, right, as femme folks. And so I think that's really challenging.
Race and sexual orientation come into this equation as well. Women of color, Indigenous women, queer and transgender people, and people with disabilities experience sexual violence disproportionately. A person's race, sexuality, and gender impacts how the world perceives them and their stories of sexual violence. According to StatsCan, Indigenous people experience sexual assault at a rate 3 times higher than non-Indigenous people. Canadians who identify as gay or bisexual had a rate of sexual assault that was 6 times higher than those who identified as heterosexual. And individuals with mental disabilities had a rate of sexual assault that was about 5 times higher. Social media has created a global forum for women to voice their trauma. But what happens when Twitter moves on? There have been countless social media campaigns where women demanded to be heard and believed. The onus is still on women to share their stories of harassment and assault to illustrate to people that no, sexual assault is not committed by monsters in the night. It's committed by male friends, acquaintances, partners, or family members. It happens at parties, at school, and in our own homes. But this is not a women's issue. It's a men's issue too. Until we confront the role that traditional gender norms and expectations of masculinity play in this cycle of violence, we will not be able to challenge them. We all need to engage in these uncomfortable conversations and hold each other accountable. You don't really get to duck this issue. It's sex. Lots of people have it. So silence here is a sign of complicity. And yeah, the most important thing, ask first. Thanks for watching. If you want to learn more about anything we talked about in this video, we've included some links in the description.